When a loving wife vanished without a trace, her husband spent 3 years convincing everyone she was gone forever, until a foul smell from his warehouse revealed the horrifying secret he'd been hiding in plain sight. Daniel and Claire Harris were the kind of couple everyone admired. They lived in a cozy 2-story house on Willow Lane, surrounded by trimmed hedges and blooming roses that Claire tended to every morning. Daniel worked as a mechanical engineer at a reputable firm, often described as intelligent and composed. Claire, on the other hand, had left her corporate job to run a small online art business from home, selling paintings that captured moments of peace and nature. Together, they seemed perfectly balanced, practical and creative, disciplined and free-spirited. Friends often called them the ideal marriage. Their photos filled social media with radiant smiles, matching outfits, and captions about love that felt timeless. But those close to them began to notice subtle changes. Claire seemed quieter in recent months, her once bright eyes dulled with fatigue. Daniel, though still polite, became more distant and controlling, often cutting her off in conversations or answering questions meant for her. Behind closed doors, their relationship was no longer the fairy tale everyone believed it to be. Arguments about money, time, and Daniel's growing obsession with his work became frequent. Claire had started sleeping in the guest room, telling friends it was because of Daniel's late-night projects. Yet no one thought much of it. Every marriage had its problems, they reasoned. What no one realized was that beneath the surface of their perfect image, something sinister was quietly brewing. The home that once echoed with laughter had turned cold, filled with unspoken resentment and mistrust. The couple's smiles and photos hid secrets that would soon unravel the illusion of happiness forever. Within weeks, their picture-perfect life would shatter, and the name Harris would become forever linked to one of Maple Ridge's darkest mysteries. It was a cold November evening when Claire Harris vanished without a trace. The sun had barely set, and the streets of Maple Ridge were quiet as a thin mist rolled through the town. According to Daniel, his wife had gone out to buy groceries from a nearby store and never returned. Hours passed before he called the police, his voice steady yet strained. When officers arrived, the house appeared untouched. Her purse was missing, but her phone was still charging on the nightstand. It was as if she had stepped out for a quick errand and simply disappeared into the night. The next morning, police located Claire's car on a desolate country road 5 miles from their home. The keys were still in the ignition, and the driver's door was slightly open. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints, no broken glass, and no clues that suggested where she might have gone. The car's contents were eerily ordinary: a half-empty water bottle, a reusable grocery bag, and one of Claire's scarves folded neatly on the passenger seat. Investigators canvassed the area, interviewed neighbors, and reviewed surveillance footage, but nothing led them closer to her. Daniel cooperated fully, answering every question and allowing officers to search the property. He even appeared on local television, pleading for help in finding his wife. His composure struck some as admirable, but to others, it seemed almost too calm. Despite exhaustive efforts, days turned into weeks, and the trail went cold. There was no ransom note, no sightings, and no communication. Claire Harris had vanished as if the earth had swallowed her whole. For the first time in Maple Ridge's quiet history, fear took root, and whispers began to question whether this disappearance was truly random at all. The disappearance of Claire Harris sent shockwaves through the peaceful town of Maple Ridge. People who once greeted Daniel and Claire with warm smiles now spoke of them in hushed tones. Flyers with Claire's photo, her kind eyes and soft smile, appeared on every lamppost and cafe window. Volunteers gathered daily to comb through the forests, fields, and riversides, refusing to believe she could simply vanish. The local news covered her story relentlessly, and soon, national media took interest. Candlelight vigils were held in front of the Harris home, with neighbors lighting candles and praying for her safe return. Daniel stood among them at first, his face pale and expression distant, holding Claire's photo but saying little. Some took his silence as grief, others saw it as detachment. When weeks passed with no progress, frustration began to grow. Detectives interviewed family members and friends repeatedly, searching for anything that might point to a motive or clue. Rumors started to spread online. Some said Claire had run away, others suspected something far darker. Despite the growing speculation, there was no evidence to support any theory. The police maintained that Daniel was not a suspect, but the community remained divided. He rarely joined the search parties, often claiming exhaustion or emotional strain. Instead, he spent long hours alone in his garage, tinkering with equipment and refusing to answer the door. The hope that Claire might still be alive began to fade, replaced by an uneasy silence that hung over Maple Ridge. By the end of the year, the flyers had weathered, the vigils had stopped, and life slowly moved on. Yet behind closed doors, no one truly forgot. The question that haunted the town remained unanswered. What really happened to Claire Harris? 2 years after Claire's disappearance, Daniel Harris sold their once-beloved home on Willow Lane. The property had become a painful reminder, he told the realtor, a place filled with ghosts of the past. Within months, he relocated to the outskirts of Maple Ridge, purchasing an isolated property bordered by thick woods. There, he built a warehouse and started a new business manufacturing large industrial water tanks. To neighbors, it seemed like a fresh start for a grieving man. He spoke little and kept mostly to himself, though his polite greetings and professional demeanor left no reason for suspicion. The business grew quickly, attracting local contracts and supplying tanks to nearby farms and factories. Money began to flow easily, and soon Daniel was living comfortably again. He bought a new truck, renovated his home, and even hired a few employees. Still, he avoided personal questions and never mentioned Claire. At night, workers reported hearing clanging sounds from the warehouse long after closing hours, as though someone was assembling machinery. Daniel often claimed he was testing new designs. Those who visited his property noticed the security, tall fences, surveillance cameras, and a locked gate that rarely opened for anyone uninvited. He seemed to have built a fortress around himself, protecting something only he knew. Despite the success of his new venture, a strange heaviness hung in the air around him, a silence too deliberate to ignore. The once friendly man from Willow Lane had turned into a shadow of his former self. People assumed grief had hardened him, but no one questioned where the sudden investment money came from or why he refused to hire cleaning crews for certain areas of his warehouse. Daniel Harris had rebuilt his life, but beneath the surface, something sinister was sealed within it. It was the middle of summer when one of Daniel Harris's employees noticed something unusual. A thick, foul odor began to drift through the warehouse, strongest near one of the large metal tanks stored at the far end of the property. The worker assumed it was a dead animal or chemical leak and mentioned it casually to Daniel. His reaction was immediate and tense. He waved off the concern, claiming that the tank contained old materials used for testing and that he would take care of it personally. Days passed, but the smell only grew worse, spreading through the building and into the surrounding air. Workers began complaining, some refusing to enter that section altogether. Finally, the employee who had first noticed it contacted the local environmental agency, worried about a potential contamination issue. When inspectors arrived, Daniel tried to stop them, insisting the tank was sealed for safety reasons and that the smell came from stagnant water. His agitation raised red flags, and the inspectors decided to proceed despite his protests. They noted that the tank was locked with heavy bolts, far more than standard practice required. The odor was overwhelming as they moved closer, forcing them to wear masks. Daniel paced nearby, visibly anxious, watching every move they made. When asked for the keys, he claimed he had misplaced them, but the inspectors decided to open it anyway using their tools. The metallic clang of their wrenches echoed through the warehouse as the bolts loosened one by one. By then, even Daniel's employees had gathered at a distance, sensing something was terribly wrong. The smell that poured out was unlike anything anyone had experienced before, a rotting, chemical stench that made several people step back. Inside that tank lay a secret Daniel could no longer hide. When the final bolt came loose and the lid of the metal tank was pried open, the truth that had been buried for 3 long years finally surfaced. The moment the seal broke, a wave of stench filled the warehouse, so strong that several inspectors covered their mouths and stumbled back. Inside the tank was a thick, dark liquid, and floating within it was something wrapped in layers of black plastic. The inspectors immediately halted the operation and called local authorities. Within an hour, the area was surrounded by police tape, and forensic teams arrived in full protective gear. The tank was carefully drained, revealing the unmistakable outline of a human body. Every step of the extraction was documented, and as the plastic was peeled away, the scene grew even more disturbing. Though decomposition had erased many features, personal items found within, a silver bracelet, a wedding ring, and remnants of clothing, hinted at the horrifying truth. When DNA tests were completed days later, the results confirmed what many had feared but never dared to believe. The body belonged to Claire Harris, missing wife of Daniel Harris, who had been presumed dead but never found. The news spread rapidly through Maple Ridge, freezing the town in disbelief. Reporters gathered outside the warehouse, and neighbors who once defended Daniel now stared in stunned silence. The man who had once been the face of heartbreak was suddenly the face of horror. Investigators detained Daniel immediately, his calm demeanor shattered as he was led away in handcuffs. What began as a missing person case had turned into a chilling discovery that would haunt the community forever. A husband's hidden crime, concealed not in the ground, but inside the very thing he built to sustain his new life. The investigation into Daniel Harris's secret life unfolded with alarming precision. Detectives began retracing every step of the 3 years following Claire's disappearance, and the puzzle pieces quickly started to connect. Digital forensics revealed a disturbing pattern in Daniel's online activity. Around the time Claire vanished, he had searched for information about chemical decomposition, body preservation, and industrial sealing methods. He had even ordered materials capable of slowing down decay, all under the pretense of testing his water tanks. Financial records showed large, unaccounted purchases of acids and solvents. Investigators also discovered that Daniel had transferred money from Claire's accounts into his own shortly after she went missing, using her forged signature. Surveillance footage from nearby roads placed his truck near the warehouse late on the night Claire was last seen. Forensic teams found traces of her DNA on the inside rim of the tank lid, confirming it had been sealed with her inside. When questioned, Daniel denied everything, claiming he was framed by a disgruntled employee. But his story fell apart under mounting evidence. Police also uncovered deleted emails between Daniel and another woman, suggesting he had been involved in an affair long before Claire's disappearance. The communications hinted at plans for a future together, free from financial burdens. What had once appeared to be grief now looked like guilt, calculated and methodical. The investigators concluded that Daniel had murdered his wife, stored her body in one of his prototype tanks, and sealed it with industrial precision, believing no one would ever find her. He had continued life as if nothing happened, confident in his own cleverness. But with every new discovery, the mask of control slipped away, revealing the cold, calculated mind of a man who had engineered his wife's disappearance down to the last bolt. Detectives soon uncovered the motive that explained the cruelty behind Daniel Harris's actions. Financial records revealed that months before Claire's disappearance, Daniel had taken out a substantial life insurance policy on her worth $500,000. Investigators learned that the payout had quietly gone to him after she was declared legally deceased 2 years later. At the same time, evidence of his secret relationship came to light. He had been involved with a woman from his workplace, someone younger who often traveled with him for business. Emails between them painted a disturbing picture, discussions of money, new beginnings, and getting rid of old baggage. Investigators pieced together a chilling timeline. Claire had begun to question Daniel's frequent absences and growing detachment. She noticed hidden financial withdrawals and confronted him about it. What began as a confrontation inside their home escalated into violence. The details of what happened next were pieced together only through forensic evidence, but it became clear that Daniel had killed Claire during that argument. Instead of disposing of her body impulsively, he planned every step with disturbing precision. Using his engineering skills, he placed her in one of his newly constructed tanks, sealed it airtight, and filled it with chemicals meant to mask decomposition. He continued his life as though nothing had happened, using the insurance money to start his new business. His warehouse, which everyone thought symbolized a fresh start, had literally been built around the secret of his crime. Every bolt he tightened, every layer he welded, had hidden his guilt more deeply. But despite all his calculations, he had overlooked one thing: time. The same structure he believed would preserve his secret forever would eventually decay, allowing the truth to escape and expose the horror he had so carefully engineered. The trial of Daniel Harris became one of the most publicized cases Maple Ridge had ever seen. Crowds gathered outside the courthouse each day, holding signs demanding justice for Claire. Inside, the courtroom was tense and silent as the prosecution unveiled a detailed timeline of Daniel's actions. They presented his internet search history, bank statements, and the recovered messages from his secret affair. Forensic experts explained how the chemicals found inside the tank matched those Daniel had purchased under his company's account. The prosecution argued that every part of his plan was premeditated, from taking the insurance policy to designing the tank that would become Claire's grave. Daniel sat motionless through most of the proceedings, his expression unreadable. When the defense took the stand, they tried to paint him as a man overwhelmed by grief and false accusations. They suggested that the evidence was circumstantial, that someone else could have used his warehouse, and that Daniel had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But the jury wasn't convinced. Witnesses testified about his controlling behavior, his secret relationship, and his growing obsession with money. The most powerful moment came when prosecutors showed a photo of Claire's wedding ring, recovered from inside the tank, a silent testimony to the betrayal she suffered. After weeks of testimony and cross-examinations, the jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, the courtroom held its breath as the verdict was read aloud. Guilty on all counts. Daniel showed no reaction as he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the people of Maple Ridge, justice had been served, but the haunting details of the case would remain etched in memory for generations to come. Years passed, but the name Claire Harris never faded from Maple Ridge's collective memory. Her story became a haunting reminder of how easily darkness can hide behind the mask of normalcy. After the trial, the Harris property and warehouse were abandoned, standing as eerie reminders of the tragedy. Eventually, the town council decided to demolish the site. In its place, they built a small memorial garden with a stone plaque engraved with Claire's name and the words, asterisk, gone but never forgotten. Asterisk. Every November, on the anniversary of her disappearance, residents gathered there to light candles and lay flowers in her honor. Her family, though forever broken by the loss, found some measure of peace knowing the truth had finally surfaced. The life insurance company withdrew its payments, and Daniel's business was dissolved, its assets sold to fund local charities supporting victims of domestic violence. Schools in the area began holding awareness programs, using Claire's story to teach the importance of recognizing warning signs in relationships. The once idyllic image of Daniel and Claire's marriage became a symbol of deception, a reminder that appearances often conceal the truth. The case continued to be studied by criminal psychologists and featured in documentaries across the country, each one revisiting the chilling details of how one man used his intelligence not to create, but to conceal. For Maple Ridge, the tragedy marked the end of innocence. The town that once believed it was untouched by evil had learned that monsters don't always lurk in the dark. Sometimes, they live behind the white fences of ordinary homes. Claire's story would remain forever etched in the hearts of those who remembered her, a woman whose light was stolen, but whose truth ultimately shattered the silence her killer tried so hard to preserve.